And now look to Mr. Salman Khurshid to continue the case for the opposition.
Madam President, ladies and gentlemen, let me begin with my favorite lines from E.M. Forster's Passage to India. This is the scene where the two protagonists, Aziz and Fielding, are riding together after the controversy of the caves incident. Aziz, in an awful rage, danced this way and that, not knowing what to do, and cried, "Down with the English anyhow, that's certain. Clear out, you fellows, double quick, I say. We may hate one another, but we hate you most. And if I don't make you go, Ahmed will, Karim will. If it's 5,500 years, we shall get rid of you. Yes, we shall drive every blasted Englishman into the sea." And then he rode against him furiously, and then he concluded, half kissing him, "You and I shall be friends." "Why can't we be friends now?" said the other, holding him affectionately. "It's what I want, it's what you want." But the horses didn't want it. They swerved apart. The earth didn't want it, sending up rocks through which riders must pass single file. The temples, the tank, the jail, the palace, the birds, the carrion, the guest house that came into view as they issued from the gap and saw Mao beneath. They didn't want it. They said in their 100 voices, "No, not yet." And the sky said, "No, not here." Madam President, I stand to oppose the motion, conscious of the fact that my opponents are formidable in reputation and accomplishment. One being a celebrated grandson of a remarkable leader of humankind, Mahatma Gandhi, of whom Albert Einstein had said, "Generations to come will scarce believe that such a one as this ever in flesh and blood walked upon this earth." He who steered India to freedom, and to the last, I believe, felt that freedom should not come at the price of partition. Understandably, his gracious grandson feels the same way. And it's difficult to say that I cannot agree. And why I cannot agree is because but for partition, we wouldn't be here debating tonight. The other more admired person who was to be here tonight, but unfortunately we miss him, is my accomplished colleague, Mr. Chidambaram, who unfortunately has had an emergency for which he had to return back to India, and we are therefore in the company of another admirable person, Mr. Ashish Ray. These great men should regret partition in this august chamber, even as chilly winds of Brexit sweep the land, suggest a helpless attempt to disassociate themselves from the compelling logic of history. And it was the compelling logic of history we got partition to us. It is, of course, ironic that this House should have chosen to debate partition of India several generations into independence, and that too within weeks of having exhibited considerable generosity and forbearance in giving a patient ear to another brilliant colleague of ours, Shashi Tharoor. Even without resorting to that provocative thesis once again, I must remind the House and my opponents that among several factors that contributed to partition was the haste with which Great Britain sought to withdraw from India in 1947 due to what I call imperial fatigue. Historians believe that but for Lord Mountbatten's restlessness to return home quickly and a similar lack of patience amongst leaders of the Congress Party to attain freedom, partition might well have been avoided. But to subscribe to that thesis, one would have to accept that the American Civil War could have been avoided, or indeed that the two world wars, not to mention more recent conflicts in Europe, Africa, and West Asia could have been avoided. But does that help? Besides, what does it matter that one regrets what happened? Of course, it makes for an interesting game some people play. What if that had not happened? Well, perhaps we might have been an all-time invincible cricket team in undivided India. But that's all. On the other hand, we might have been stuck with the likes of Hafiz Saeed and military dictatorships and the recipe for civil war in the subcontinent. Inevitably, people, indeed supporters of the motion, cite the pain and trauma, and we heard them say so, inflicted by partition, violence that uprooted hundreds and thousands, claiming casualties that are believed to have touched the figure of 200,000. Some might point to the lingering unwholesome impact in terms of communal strife, the three major wars fought by India and Pakistan, and the unending proxy war that continues to trouble us. But how does that establish that without partition, we might have been better off? That the psychological divide that had manifested itself in periodic violent clashes from 2019 could have actually been reversed. It might not be wrong to suggest that much of our suffering then and now is attributable to the haste and unpreparedness for the Great Divide. If there is something to regret, it is the state to which, sadly, we are threatening to reduce ourselves, despite the remarkable accomplishments as an emerging economy and leading peaceful world power. The morbid and anti-liberal pictures of contemporary India that have emerged as dark spots on our syncretic nation are explained as the consequence of partition by protagonists, although it is the virus that made partition inevitable. It is another matter that we could not kill that virus then. Despite partition, we repudiated the two-nation theory, with the world's second largest Muslim population being proud citizens of India. Pakistan self-consciously chose not to follow the advice of its own leader, Jinnah, on life beyond partition, when he said at their Constituent Assembly, I quote, "You may belong to any religion or caste or creed. That has nothing to do with the business of the state," unquote. But sadly, some of his contemporary ideological detractors unreasonably aim to create a Hindu Pakistan in India. Is there anything at all, if there is anything at all to regret? Indeed, it is that. This ideology caused partition and not the other way around. The regret, if at all, must be about the problem remaining despite the heavy price paid for partition. My worthy opponents, I know, regret that and indeed have worked tirelessly to prevent the macabre dream from becoming a reality. As I stoutly oppose the motion, I applaud their convictions. To understand the inevitability of partition, it is important to go beyond regret and getting mired in wishful, romantic thinking. The validation of our position on this side of the House is found in the ultimate partition of Bangladesh from Pakistan. Some relations are like one between Aziz and Fielding. Harmony comes, but it comes after parting. We might learn from erstwhile Soviet Union how that can be done peacefully. On the other hand, learn from Germany how to reunite again. But regret gets us nowhere. Refusal to accept ground realities will only repeat painful divisions seen in the Balkans, Korea, Vietnam, Iraq, Syria, et al. On the other hand, regret may well lead to identifying the cause of that regret. Inevitably, it will turn to Muslims of India. The regret does not stop at regret. It then begins to move towards reparation and conflict. And these Muslims of India are the very people who chose secular India over religious Pakistan. Defeat of the motion today might well be a step towards greater peace on earth, and I urge my opponents to consider that as an ultimate achievement of the debate tonight. I thank you, Madam President.